Yeah. Hi, everybody. I'm really excited to be here today, to be in a room that TED has convened of forerunners, because we know that forerunners, we're taking these large leaps of faith oftentimes, and we're moving into these spaces that maybe others don't totally understand or grasp. And so we also get the benefit of understanding that when we make these leaps of faith, that's also where sometimes God meets us in the most compelling and meaningful ways. That's where we see the biggest miracles. We're giving God a chance to move. And I, of course, Ted said, work in big tech, and also was alluded to in the last talk that there's someone like me here. And we work at, one might say that I'm a marketplace minister. And when we were working in these big tech companies, we did this thing called Pray for Tech, and we were praying in the tech companies. We had amazing turnouts of people working and understanding these technologies that were transforming the world. We actually did 24 hours global prayer around the big tech companies that circled the globe, all the way from the US to Asia to Europe. And I had a journalist come up to me because she saw me at this event, and she's interviewing me, and I got really nervous because you never know what they're going to write about. But then I saw that she quoted me saying, in the article that came out like a year later, "We're seeing these answers and these solutions from heaven come through us into our code, into our strategies, into our planning, into our design. May we pray for every meeting we have. May we take captive every keystroke we make, everything that we type." And I thought to myself, did I really say that? But it's true. These are words that really resonate with my heart. And so I'm excited to meet with all of you today in this space. One way to kind of explain it, and because I work in artificial intelligence, is this dichotomy between search and grow. And I feel like for Passion Talks, we've kind of done 10 years of searching. We're kind of still in the searching phase, but we have this desire to move into another space. The idea for this came up in 2009, and we had academics, students that were getting some of the best education in the world coming together, but never really talking about the things that we deeply love, the deep curiosities for which we've been investigating. And oftentimes these people don't get a chance at the church to even share about these passions and the depths of which they love with their minds. And so we did a bunch of events around understanding and cultivating that mind muscle. And in particular here, these two events, Nicole Dickens did Passion Dialogues, where we would convene influencers together to see where our passions intersect. And so that's also to say that people see Passion Talks commonly as this yearly conference, but we have all these things that has been umbrellaed into this work that we do around loving with our minds. And so where does that come from? Well, it was in the previous talk. The greatest commandment is to love God with all your soul, all your heart, and all your mind. And so we've done this we're starting to write papers and publish. And this was submitted to one of the top machine learning AI conferences about broadening collaborations and research. And so the problem space that Ted asked us to present about, well, for me, I would describe it as an intellectual economy. And what that looks like is everyone has something to learn and everyone has something to teach. Another way we've kind of encountered this was through the Global Impact Summit, for which many of you participated in. We brought together different groups, and we asked them, what are you trying to do? As someone working in tech, we often get people coming up to us saying, how do we integrate artificial intelligence into the things that we do? And the question I have for them is well, what are you trying to do? So we created an event to bring people around. What we learned at this event, I would describe it through Maslow's hierarchy of needs, is that a lot of the lowest hanging fruit is at the base of this triangle. And as you go up this triangle, these solutions become more complicated and require more understanding and more strategizing. And even doing the bottom of the pyramid at scale requires a lot of thought, just like you've heard in some of the previous talks already. And so what I think of, when I think of this verse, that greater love is no one than this, than to lay down one's life for their friends, is this idea that love comes at a cost, is that we love something so much we're willing to give to it. And what I want to pose to everyone today is, what does that mean when understanding is the cost? What is the cost? What is the expense in understanding? And it's often not easy. Oftentimes we stay away from things we don't understand. Oftentimes if something's too complicated, we don't feel invited in. But maybe God is telling us here today that these opportunities are open to us to take that leap or to pay that cost out of love. Examples of this that where we're loving with our minds was through Academic Bridges, which was this problem addressing the lack of opportunities around the world and how talent was global. And we had this amazing story where we brought, just in 2019, we were able to bring these students, leaders identified by their ministries from Africa, to attend Stanford University for a summer school, to go to Google, to go to Facebook, and to get this world-class treatment, connecting with Africans in the Bay Area as well to learn about career development. And what was really amazing, it just sounded so amazing that the 4 pictures at the bottom were Moroccan leaders, young women Moroccans, that went to get their visa saying that they got invited by Google, Stanford, and Facebook, and they got denied because it just sounded like maybe they were shocked. And we were like, what's going on? Why would they deny this? And we found out that it's because they were suspicious that we were maybe traffickers because of this opportunity. And so so we got through that. We eventually booked a later flight, but they were able to make it. They had an amazing time at Google, Facebook, and Stanford. And then during the pandemic hits the next year, and we're like, oh, like this program, we were gonna do it again. We were gonna make it bigger. And what we did instead was we wanted to innovate, so we created a pen pal program, which connected Stanford students through WhatsApp with these leaders on another entirely different continent. In 2020 to 2021, actually 2022, well, that year we started thinking, well, what's more local? Because like there's so much need even around us. And I don't know if you all know, but there's hundreds of historically Black colleges and universities. And so we leveraged, I heard someone from Monterey County are here, some people. We leveraged the connections we had with the Monterey Jazz Festival to scholarship the students coming in and to give them career development and training to help get them into these top professional careers as we connect through these experiences through culture and music. And you could read more about that there. In the future, we're thinking of having international teaching adventures or connecting more. I've actually taught for Stanford in all these different countries. These are my pictures, these are my students, and I was teaching about artificial intelligence, but through game design and robotics, so it was really fun for them. Currently today, we're partnering with Danny Kim, who's an incredible person who isn't in town this week, or else he'd totally be here, but he's our program chair for this year's Passion Talks, and he's actively doing this now. And so, like, to transition more into Passion Talks this year, I want to talk about like what Passion Talks has produced in the past. So here is an example of a talk, and this was given by a founder named Maria, who grew up following her father into the Colombian coffee plantations, and as she ascended into positions of influence, she said, you know, I wanna create a space for these coffee farmers, and I want to create a space where we can elevate them out of exploitation. I remember hearing this talk, and she started crying, and then I was crying, and I was holding a coffee, and I was crying into my coffee. But then today, 6 years later, I see her face all over Google, and I see her coffee all over Google, and I even wrote her an email a couple months ago saying that it fills my heart to see that your coffee is being served in all of our buildings. And then she wrote back saying, praise God for his goodness, so happy to hear from you. Not only that, she signs it as CEO of this company. She's been interviewed by Good Morning America, and these are these amazing success stories of someone becoming a top 100 founder. But what we thought, I feel like these are the exceptions. And so what we've learned in 10 years of Passion Talks, and I'm not going to go through each of these, but what I would summarize is the obstacles we come up against is what I would say is the holy huddle. And I use the picture of squirrels to show the comfort. And I think I think of another dichotomy of you know, what does it mean to be outside the huddle? Or that sometimes we huddle and we think if we just if we get more people to huddle, then eventually we'll be able to go out and do stuff. But I would say that in this next chapter of things, we're gonna shift from focusing on creating these huddles and actually going out and taking these leaps of faith. Because I feel like God will encounter some of us even more so outside of the huddle than he would in the huddle. And so and I feel like I'm preaching to the choir because you all get that. And then how do you know what trajectory or where to aim if you're not seeing the gravity of the huddle? Well, I love this verse. I always use it as someone who works with data. I love that there's a data-driven verse that we recognize the trees by their fruits. So it's very empirical and observant. And that's not to say that like every metric is meaningful. Like I actually, if you follow me on social media, I really like squirrels. So I thought, what would it be like to make a squirrel channel? And actually, it's actually not that hard to get viewers. I have, in the last 28 days, 100,000 views. You can like, comment, and subscribe. But I want to talk about that it's not always about these numbers, right? We're in an influencer culture. Some of these strategies require a bit more exploration. And so I talk about Project Tandem, which is what we did this year with the Monterey Jazz Festival. We had a big tech company go in and sponsor these students at a larger scale. 80 HBCUs and 80 HSI students, and we did workshops with them for career training and mentorship. We looked at their resumes, we helped encourage them. We actually invited our executives to join them in conversation, and they actually also got to see them perform. So there was a shared exchange. It wasn't just a one-way giving, but it was a both ways receiving. We also took a bunch of employees and volunteered, and here we have what was really amazing was that this money went towards their first, this is a 65-year event. This is the first ever gospel worship service they ever had, and I got my company to pay for it. And it was one of the most powerful moments, honestly, was when the student said, or when the artistic director said, "This music is ours. And without this music, you all wouldn't have your music." And it was during this gospel concert where they were telling the story. It was, we've come this far. And these executives from these big tech companies were listening to the spiritual journey of what has been done against these communities and seeing it as an opportunity to learn. But through that spiritual journey, we actually circled up. We circled up with the choir and we prayed together. And not everyone in that circle had ever done that before. And I love that the artistic director, Grammy Award winning, she said that this was one of the highlights of her life. Not only that, Baltimore News captured it, and other companies saw that this was happening. They jumped in and they wanted to be part of it. Alaska Airlines gave them free round-trip tickets, 2, in fact. They gave them a round-trip ticket to come here, so they did this whole media push around that Alaska Airlines. And then this idea of just meeting these organizations and the influence they have in their passions for diversity, equity, and inclusion, and that there's a world where everyone belongs, it just has to be built. This was the one-page ad that was run in the Monterey Jazz Festival program. And again, this is kind of messy, so I want to round it up to this, what does it look like, right? Because we've just introduced a grab bag of stuff. And so I can kind of give some identifiers. First and foremost, we're not looking at vanity metrics of I don't know if greater things meant that I would get a lot of people to watch squirrel videos. I don't know if that's what Jesus talked about. But we're moving towards focusing on the few. And then we're not for intellectual gatekeeping, but we do want to be protective of our culture. We're not looking to get the average, find the lowest connection point, but we actually want to elevate to each other's expertise. And finally, I know that a lot of us can feel like, oh, we're just trying to be ego-driven, or we're trying to be, trying to elevate ourselves. But I think there's actually an act of worship in excellence. And so when Ted asked me to do this, I'm like, I'm going to do my best that I can. And I'm already going over, but I'm going to do the best that I can because out of love for Ted, but also that everything I do is for God. And so I'm like, God, I drew this picture for you. What do you think? I want to talk about the metropolis of God as kind of the driving force of this. I'm not as kingdom-minded as I am this representation of a city with citizenship and representation. And so the last thing I'm going to do is introduce what this interdisciplinary intellectual marketplace looks like this year. In a couple weeks, we're going to have, we've moved on from focusing from individuals to speakers, to people who are convening the communities, to people looking for the shared interests of community leaders in these problem spaces. We have over 40 talks in 3 weeks. We're looking at the health and addiction space. This is run by Dr. Yamashita, and he is looking to bring together doctors, therapists, pastors. We have people working in art and resistance, looking at how art can be a representation of how we confront injustice, specifically focusing on gentrification issues in Oakland and San Francisco. We're looking at innovation and education, how we can democratize that around the world. We also created people focused in specific technologies and solutions, like Christians in blockchain and Christians in AI. And Dr. Yamashita actually said, he hopes that it brings a synergy. This is on November 5th, where AI folks, blockchain folks, artists come together to help address some of these problems. So it's that holistic approach. And we have it set up in a poster format. We tried this in 2018. We're going to do it digitally, so it's all virtual. And we're also working with Pastor Dave Gibbons on creating a pipeline to help elevate these communities and elevate these leaders, focusing on the few of those. So now you've heard me talk about this jumble of stuff. Again, everyone has something to learn and teach, and the problem is filling that high demand for intellectual capital. With this intellectual marketplace, where all are welcome. Here, if you want to take a quick photo, this would be a good chance to do that. And I'm basically wrapping up. This is the penultimate slide. If you want to connect, there's my Substack. The community aspect, I think all of you have amazing spaces where we can gather intellectuals, problem solvers, practitioners around, and we'd love to design a space for you next year, but come to our November 5th event. Danny Kim's is already looking for mentors, so if you're ready to give intellectually, but there's also other causes as well. And I wanted to end on this quote from C.S. Lewis, that creatures are not born with desires unless satisfaction for these desires exists. But we make it our main object in life to press on to this country that the current country doesn't satisfy these needs fully, but it's just an inkling that there is a future country and that we are to help others to do the same. And what I want to explain is that appetite that we have, that mental appetite, is our curiosity, and how can we love God fully through that. So thank you.
So we have time for a great job, actually. So we have time for a couple questions. Any questions for Sherol?
So I couldn't get my phone out fast enough to take any pictures. Is this somewhere on the internet where we can look at it?
Yeah, well, this link this page basically also has everything as well, but I will move it back for you.
Peter.
You mentioned the November 5th event. Where is it? How do we connect?
You connect with it through that community link that I put, and it's virtual, so it's a 2-hour in Saturday morning.
Any other questions? Eric.
Oh, I think. Yeah. Yeah.
And you need some AI materials. Is there a place or repository where you can find materials that I can use to do that?
So right now, the best thing to do, if you can connect with the communities, that we're bringing all the leaders of these spaces, and they're bringing speakers that will know about these resources. By the way, I just saw Stuart. He's actually one of last year's speakers. And it's going to be it's not going to be like, we sat through so many Zoom calls over the pandemic, I feel. This is going to be non-linear, and you're going to be able to pick and choose which spaces you engage with, which problem space. So if you're interested in addiction, you can go to that space. If you're interested in gentrification, you can go to the arts and resistance space.
Thank you.
Yeah, I was looking at you, and I was like, wow, and then in a passion thing, this is a phenomenal site that you all need to just get on and see. I mean, the way she has it set up is that you do these talks, and then you get to stroll through somebody else and listen to them as they talk about what it is they do. We talked online, so I've never met her in person, and so I'm like, oh man, that's her, but it's just phenomenal work. You all, if you get an opportunity to go on there, I mean, it's like you're in a conference on your computer, and you get to navigate on the computer to certain passion talks, and the way it's set up, I mean, if you go on there, you'll be blessed.
Yeah, we want people, I mean, we want to, again, protect our culture, so obviously there's always some sort of rubric to see which talks make sense for which year, for which space. But yeah, the idea is that it's a many-to-many interaction. A lot of times you get this one-to-many interaction, which I think is great. But there's a lot of people that I think, I call it the church's silent minority sometimes, the shy, the non-type A people, but they've got a lot, God has them stewarding so much, and if you just ask them the right questions, they come alive.
Okay. Vanessa?
So one of the things that I'm seeing with, our nonprofits is that there's just a lack of tech skills to be able to do ministry, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so is this group, the community, kind of signing up, when you talk about kind of starting to do the work, are they signing up, do you find, in the
Yeah.
community to do those kinds of projects?
So I can imagine us bringing together a space next year where we get people interested in this and we do a big call to action and we try to draw people in. What I found with like this idea of like this problem of filling the high demand for intellectual capital is that I think that there's issues on the supply side and the demand side, in that a lot of these people don't see themselves as being able to overflow in that way, and we got to help them connect those dots that they are meaningful. A lot of times, I think a lot of them have been conditioned that their job is to sit in the pews and then tithe on Sundays. And so we need to awaken them and tell them to not press that snooze button anymore.
Another question?
So we learned about oak trees this morning, so I'm wondering what is one thing that we can learn from squirrels?
So squirrels, they during the harvest, they've got amazing memories. They have actually regions of their neighborhoods. They have a little society, actually. Actually, I can identify them now. Like they'll come up to me because they know me, and I'll be reading the Bible, and I'll be like, all right, I'm reading Matthew today. They're like eating this like pile of nuts, and I'm like, here I'm reading Matthew today, and I'm just sitting there because I'm having my quiet time with squirrels. I think that they've just got this amazing memory to be able to strategically place their resources so that they can last through the winters. And I think that is such an incredible part of wisdom, how they're able to exercise the abilities of their brain function.
Michael?
How can churches tap into this incredible asset that we don't know exists?
Well, they can sign up to come. As we could see at my last slide, bit.ly Passion Talks 22. Starting next year, we'll be opening it up for people to create. First, we target people who are leading spaces and communities first, people who have clearly defined problems. And then, so if you have people at that level, then we'd want them to come around. Actually, I think this slide might be better to represent that. And then we have people so we have these different roles that you could fill. Initially, Passion Talks focused on individuals, because what I thought was interesting was how people don't even know how to articulate what they're passionate about, right? They're not even connected to that yet. And then we found speakers that wanted to articulate and gave them a platform, so we have people like that. Session chairs are people who want to shape a space to find a solution to come together. And then there's like another broader community to help leaders share in the common challenges that we all have and how we can solve those problems together as leaders, which I think is all of you. You're all kind of like in that top layer.
One also very simple action item response to you, Michael, is this event they're having on November 5th, Passion Talks. We can promote it all across all California and invite people to come in and experience it themselves.
Yeah, and it's virtual. We actually have speakers from Africa, the African continent. We have speakers from Asia, because by design, the virtual aspect allows us to have as many talks as we want from all over the world. The only issue we have is the time zone thing, which did make Asia a little harder this year. But we have a speaker from Ghana speaking from Accra this year, for example.
But how do we connect them to our churches that have great needs? That's what I'm asking.
Right.
For example, Aaron has tremendous needs.
Yeah.
That is in technology that he can't do.
Right.
He's capable, but he needs help.
Yeah, so we would want to design a space for that. And so what that space does is it creates a community, creates a culture. We invite people into that space so they can understand the problem. And you could also do it on the speaker's level of like just presenting and talking about what you need. But like our biggest focus, we're focusing more towards these focusing on the few, those who are the ones looking to kind of spread their message to the masses and not necessarily the masses themselves. But we have something for everyone.
Excellent. Wonderful. Let's give the Lord a hand clap. We're going to our break is coming up in 5 minutes. So let's take the next 5 minutes to discuss around the table, and then I'll ping you when it's time for our 15-minute break, and then you guys can continue your Love Fest if you want to. So do you have a discussion question for everyone around the table?
Yeah, I think this really resonated with me. Like, what do you have to learn? What do you have to teach? What is that passion space that you would, what's that space you'd want to be part of or convene? And how do you love God with your mind? Sorry, is that too many? I'm a little extra sometimes.
Wonderful. All right. Go for it.